everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Welcome back to this week's Astro Weather for October 16th through the 23rd. Oh boy, guys, things are going to be building all week long. We have some really interesting astrology that's setting up all the way up until the 24th of October when we have a solar eclipse in the sign of Scorpio. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm a Western and an evolutionary astrologer with an emphasis on working with tarot and the Sabian symbols. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, please make sure you click the button below so that way you know when we have new content coming out. And thank you for joining us. Leave us a thumbs up. Sharing is caring. Give us a comment. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Big thank you to everybody who's been interacting in the channel. You guys are awesome. We've seen so much growth. Thank you very, very, very much. Guys, it's like every time I look at this screen, I'm like, there's just so much stuff happening. So I'm not going to waste too much time. We're going to get right into it. We're going to talk about why this is such a karmic week ahead. It's going to kick off today with the moon being in Cancer. So the moon is at home in the sign of Cancer. However, as the moon continues to move through Cancer, it's going to be coming into not just squares with Mercury, which makes it challenging for us to communicate, but also into Monday, the moon will keep coming into squares with Venus and also the sun. So Sunday, Monday, moodiness. We might notice more on Monday as the moon gets into the later degrees. The square between also the moon in Cancer and Chiron can bring up some emotional sensitivity, some ouches when it comes to expressing how we feel. When the moon's in Cancer, we have a tendency to want to focus on home, family, retreating, safety, security, all that kind of fun stuff. So that's going to lead clear into Monday morning on the 17th, excuse me. Now on the 17th, Monday morning, this is where I think you guys are really going to start to feel the breakdown a little bit. Part of it is because this is a 3/4 square. So we're actually working from when we had the new moon in Libra, came into a full moon in Aries, and now it is in the final 3/4 before this moon becomes a solar eclipse on the 24th. So when you have the moon that is making this closing angle, it's uncomfortable. People get grouchy. We feel things kind of dismantling and breaking down. On top of that, we also have the moon that is going to be in opposition to Pluto. So we feel emotionally threatened. We feel challenges in terms of feeling safe and secure. And the moon will also be coming into a square with Venus and the sun in Libra. So I've said to you guys that as we get to the second half of October, things get a little bit more hairy. We're still kind of feeling some of these trines between, planets that are in air signs in Aquarius as well as in Gemini. So I'm going to keep telling you guys, when in doubt, communicate. We haven't lost those trines yet. But the 17th is kind of a funky day, right? So whenever we see the moon that's in a square to the sun, it doesn't feel like things come together very easily. It feels like things are just kind of like discombobulated. Moon square Venus is also going to have us kind of like having an issue in terms of emotionally relating and being able to kind of give what we need sometimes in relationships. And this is also going to be a day where we are going to start to see that the Mercury shadow ends. So now Mercury is moving to 9 degrees. It's coming out of the retrograde shadow. So we saw it actually retrograde from Libra, dip back into Virgo. So actually the effects of the Mercury retrograde is just about wrapped up. If you were waiting to sign something, or if you've been waiting to kind of be in the clear, you might want to wait another day or so still. But just know that the effects are going to be done. We've also got the moon in Cancer that's going to be in a trine to Neptune and Pisces. So that has us feeling emotional, sensitive, psychic, intuitive, clearing, healing, that kind of stuff. And then we've also got a Venus in conjunct Neptune that's setting up here. Okay. So Venus in Libra, happy in that placement, but the quincunx or the inconjunct to Neptune is not entirely clear when it comes to our emotions and our feelings or our receptivity. And the same day, we've got the sun in Libra that's coming into a trine with Mars. Guys, the astrology on Monday is just like, wow, there's a lot of stuff kind of going on here. And I remember telling you guys from the full moon in Aries on, you were going to start to feel this intensity building up towards the eclipses. I like the Sun trine Mars. I feel like that's really great because it's highlighting the ability to kind of work with other people and staying motivated and communicating and like being able to get support from others as long as we're, you know, kind of walking the walk and talking the talk. But I'm not entirely too thrilled about a moon opposed Pluto and in a square to the Sun and Venus, especially being that, you know, Venus is kind of like the real star of the show right now during Libra season. So there's definitely going to be a lot of feeling like we're between a rock and a hard place when it comes to being able to find balance between our inner emotional private life, our responsibilities out in the world, and also balancing relationships. So Monday's probably not the best day to be focusing on having meetings, even though the Sun is going to be trining Mars, which is kind of like action-packed and moving forward. This is happening at 24 degrees. So it's talking more about our vision and talking about how we feel and our emotions and being a little bit more open and sensitive. Okay, so let me take you guys now to Tuesday, the 18th. Okay, so we've got Saturn that's getting ready to station on the 18th. It's going to be stationing at 18 degrees. So basically when a planet is stationing, it's when it's getting ready to turn retrograde or go direct. In this case, Saturn is getting ready to go direct after several months of a retrograde. So when planets are stationing, they have like an extra potency. There's like an extra power to them. So if you have any planets between 16 and 20 degrees of the fixed signs, so that would be Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius, pay attention. You may feel this, as well as those of you guys who are Capricorn and Aquarius ascendants. This is the last retrograde that Saturn is going to be having in the sign of Aquarius. So from here on out, Saturn's going to move forward in degrees until we get to 2023, where in the closer to the spring, it's going to be March, Saturn is going to go into Pisces. So no more hiding. You know, now that Saturn's getting ready to go direct, there's a need to really kind of deal with structure, timing, commitments, anything in regards to karma. And this 18 degrees is really fascinating to me. The same degree that we saw the Mars North Node Uranus conjunction in the sign of Taurus. So obviously this has a lot of potency at 18, and it is reactivating that conjunction that we saw at the end of July, the beginning of August. Now you guys are quite familiar, I'm sure, with the Saturn-Uranus squares. I've talked about this intermittently this last year, talking about where there's some area in Aquarius where there is structure and commitment, kind of slowing down and like really focusing on the goals. And then there's some area in Taurus where it's just kind of like a loose wire and it wants to kind of like break free. So these two planets have been in a square. As we get closer to November, that square is going to kind of ease up. But when Saturn goes direct, I think we're going to feel the impact of that pretty significantly. And 18 degrees has a connection to health, wellness, anything in regards to our schedule, you know, the service industry. If you're looking at it from a degree astrology perspective, it's very much connected to Virgo. So I'm anticipating that there's going to be some interesting information that's coming out to the masses in regards to these topics. Let's leave it at that. We've got Venus that is in a trine with Mars. So this is a nice aspect. Okay. So Venus and Mars, star-crossed lovers. Venus is about opening and receptivity and relationships and harmony and diplomacy, especially in the sign of Libra. So as it moves into a trine with Mars in Gemini, this is an air trine. You know, Venus is able to communicate and tell Mars what it is she needs for pleasure, what it is she needs for relationships. The Sun is highlighting that as well, and Mars is receiving that. Mars is also getting ready to station and go retrograde closer to the end of this month. So we've got a lot of like planetary things that are either turning retrograde or getting ready to wake up. Not a bad day though, especially earlier on the 18th as we start to see this trine. We might just notice it's more social, it's more about having fun. The moon will also be in the sign of Leo, so early morning and even into the early afternoon, we're still receiving trines between Jupiter in Aries and the moon in Leo. So not a bad day on tap actually on the 18th. That will be Tuesday. For several days also, we will see that we're going to have Venus and the Sun moving side by side. Kind of unusual to see them kind of be neck and neck for several days. And I think that that's intentionally leading up into the eclipse, really highlighting themes in regards to love and pleasure and our own personal values and things changing as planets get into Scorpio. Now here's where things start to get intense. This is going to be the 19th. Okay. So on the 19th, we're going to see the Sun and Venus. They're starting to come into conjunction. And we're first going to see the Sun square Pluto. All right. So I want you guys to think back to January of 2022, earlier this year. I know it seems like forever ago, almost a year ago. But when the Sun and Venus conjunct, right? It was during Venus retrograde. Venus was retrograde in Capricorn. A seed was being planted. That's when we had a inferior conjunction of Venus, the Venus retrograde conjunct the Sun, an awareness in regards to our relationships, our values, and our goals under the sign of Capricorn physically, or things relating to our career. Well, now we've got Venus that's coming into conjunction with the Sun. We call this the superior conjunction, which is really going to peak later in the week. It's a really interesting thing to see the Venus-Sun conjunction come through trines to Mars, which is really incentivizing us to communicate more in relationships and find more harmony and actually take action where it's like necessary to be able to kind of communicate better and find the middle ground with people. We've also seen the Sun and Venus come into a trine with Saturn, so there's like a lot of commitments and things that are solidifying. And then right after that, we see the Sun square Pluto. So Sun square Pluto is always going to bring some kind of intensity, right? Pluto is the god of change and transformation, death and rebirth. And as we're seeing the Sun come into a closing square with Pluto, something is dying off. We're getting rid of something. We're clearing something out. Something has to kind of pass. And there can be some fear, you know, some insecurities. There can be some power struggles. There can be some ego issues that happen when we see the Sun-Pluto square right here. But it's unusual because it's also factoring in Venus. And so, you know, if we look at the nodes, right, the nodes of the moon, we've got the North Node in Taurus ruled by Venus. And Taurus is more about like that pleasure, that stability, that security, money, resources, earth element. South Node ruled by Pluto as well as Mars, which is releasing pain, tension, fear, trauma. So we've got the North Node Lord, Venus, coming into a frictional square with the South Node. So I've kind of like sat on this. I've been thinking about it all week long, and I'm like, okay, the conclusion that I've come to is that, you know, love and partnership and relationship has to override fear. Like that's the bottom line. That's what we're going to be looking at this week. But then we look at it from the perspective of the Venus square Pluto, and that can be a little bit more intense. You know, usually when we see like the Sun square Pluto, there's, you know, a power struggle with a boss or with a male family member. Sometimes out in the world, we'll see a really significant like male figure die, or somebody kind of like transition, or somebody kind of be brought into the limelight in regards to some kind of like abuse of power is something that we see with that square. But Venus is a little bit different. So we're going to see the Sun Venus square Pluto in Capricorn, and some themes that I have here for the Pluto square is just, it's kind of spooky, right? Especially thinking like we're getting into the fall season, coming up on Halloween. Venus Pluto squares like remind me of just really intense, potent, obsessive, fixated energy. And in relationship, a Venus Pluto square can be obsession and things that bring up like lots of like aggression and conflict and passion that can push us to break through insecurities or cross a line. So when we see this come up, you want to watch out for like extreme issues in regards to emotions and feelings and relationships. It can really shake things up, especially karmically speaking, because I think Pluto has a lot to do with karma as well and karmic growth. It can bring up some complicated relationship situations. You want to watch out for like, you know, getting fixated on something and stalking somebody's Instagram, or drunk texting someone and like telling them all your feelings and kind of like spilling the beans. It happens a couple times a year. Usually we have this square that happens about twice a year, sometimes a little, one extra time. Another way that this can play out is it can bring up some potential like love triangle situations, or things that are like more kind of toxic or dangerous, because that's what Pluto rules. So for the Sun and Venus to be moving side by side, where the Sun is highlighting relationship themes and Libra is all about partnership and balance and fairness, Venus joins the group and then squares Pluto. I think we're going to be looking at what is potentially some hazardous type of situations in regards to relationships, money, our health, because Venus can also be talking about health and balance as well. What is or is not fair. And I think that we're looking at what might not be healthy or in balance in relationships, and what actually needs to be kind of cut out, right? Right on the heels of getting ready to have an eclipse. So you want to watch on like the 18th, 19th, 20th for this energy as the Sun, Venus, Pluto squares. You're going to feel this more if you're going to be a Taurus or a Libra rising. You might really feel this also if you're a Scorpio rising, because you're going to feel that friction between your house, your first house lord, and your seventh house lord. And it's going to play out differently for everyone. So you want to look at where Libra is in your chart, and you want to look at where Capricorn is in your chart. And know that this particular square is closing something up. It's wrapping something up. And it's not all negative. I think that the Sun and Venus coming together with a trine to Mars, and also we're still receiving a trine from Saturn, is basically saying like there is a way to communicate and talk through the scary feelings, talk through the fears in regards to dealing with finances, talking through things in therapy, or in our private relationships, and being able to open up and kind of talk about issues that we're having in terms of values or money or relationships. So watch for those hangups. Those are definitely going to get some people. When we have the North Node and the South Node Lord that are in some friction to one another, we definitely see sparks that begin to fly. This same day, later in the day, you guys are also going to see that the moon, which is in Leo, will be squaring the nodes first earlier, much earlier in the morning, probably when some of us on the West Coast are still sleeping. And when the moon squares its own nodes, it's basically saying like there's a need to integrate more emotions, be aware of kind of like what's changing and what's getting shaken up. So we might wake up to this actually in the morning on the 19th. Then we will see the moon in the morning in a square to Uranus. So there is some emotional, destabilization, some emotional reactions. The moon in Leo definitely brings up some drama. It comes into an opposition with Saturn. So I keep telling you guys, watch when the moon goes into Leo, because it's going to reenact this grand fixed square, really kind of climactic. But then we have the moon that's getting ready the next day to go into Virgo, and it's going to be starting the balsamic phase where it's preparing for the solar eclipse. So yeah, lots of stuff is going on the 18th and the 19th, and Monday and Wednesday are days to watch. These are days that I think are going to be a little bit more difficult in terms of getting along with other people. We're just going to see some roadblocks, especially with the moon in opposition to Saturn. Not knowing how to emotionally relate, having a difficult time being vulnerable, focusing more on our heart's desires, having a difficult time sharing values with other people, feeling kind of at odds with a collective, and not necessarily getting on well with other people. P.S. Also, Saturn is getting ready to station, so I think that that's going to be a little bit more potent than usual. Okay, so then we get to the 20th. And on the 20th, we are going to have the moon will be moving into Virgo. So let me switch that for you guys so you can see. I'm visual, so it'll make it easier for me too. There we go. So the moon's going to move into Virgo. We've got the Sun and Venus starting their 3 days of conjunctions. So that's interesting as well. It's going to start at 27 degrees, and it'll go to 28 degrees, and it'll go to 29 degrees, and then both the Sun and Venus will move into Scorpio at the same time. But we're still feeling that square, so that's kind of lingering in the air as well. We've got early in the morning, the moon in Virgo will in conjunct Jupiter. So Jupiter in Aries wants to have us kind of kicking things up, being more independent, getting moving and shaking. And then the moon in Virgo is like, wait, hold on, let me check my schedule. You know, let's make sure it's time to go. So there can be a little bit of like some stuff going on that's uncomfortable there. 3 days of the Sun, Venus conjunction. So like I said, for 3 days, Venus is really in the same degree as the Sun, but it's going to be right behind the Sun. So you'll hear that Venus is invisible. So Venus is getting ready to reveal something. There's a new Sun-Venus point that's going to emerge at 29 degrees. We'll see later this week. But as soon as Venus pulls ahead of the Sun, right after that, you know, they both move into Scorpio when we have this eclipse. So we may not really fully see the effects of what's been going on during this cycle until closer to Sagittarius season, when Venus becomes more visible in the skies ahead of the Sun. Jupiter now returns to 0 degrees of Aries. It has been retrograde for some time. It's getting ready to go back into the sign of Pisces. It's going to be doing that in about a week or so. And when it does do that, it's going to be more emotional expansion, more in regards to intuition. We're absorbing more. Those of you guys who are empaths are going to kind of pick stuff up, I think, a little bit more. But 0 degrees of a cardinal sign is very potent. You know, Jupiter at 0 degrees of Aries, the very first degree of the zodiac. Jupiter has been picking up momentum ever since it retrograded back to 3. So even though it's dipping back into Pisces briefly, this is like a new seed that's being planted. So I think the cardinal signs are really going to feel this, especially if you're within the first couple degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, as well as Capricorn. You're going to feel this square big time, because even though it's retrograde, there can be new things that are being initiated with that 0 degree conjunction. And yeah, you're going to see planets in Libra, like the Sun and Venus, that are going to be in conjunct that for a couple of days. It'll be a little bit, I think, more potent once it gets into the sign of Scorpio, because that's like a lot of Mars energy, you know? Friday, even though we're coming into the eve of an eclipse, it is a little bit more mellow. Now we've got the moon that's going to be in the early degrees of Virgo. It's starting to come into a trine with the North Node. This will be midday on October 21st. That's Friday. We're going to see the moon in Virgo trine the North Node and trine Uranus. So physical stability, we're getting organized, we're cleaning things up, we're making sense of stuff that's been breaking down or not working. So that's really positive. But this is, once again, like this dismantling phase. So I could see planets going through Virgo that's like, you know, how do we fix this? Or, you know, like, I've got this health issue or this crisis or this problem with like with a pet or an issue with my schedule. So there's something that's kind of falling apart. I think the early day, like the first half of the 21st, is the best while you're still receiving this trine between the moon's North Node and Uranus, where we can adapt and we can do better with some of these changes. As we get into later in the evening, the moon is going to start coming into a square with, well, an opposition with Neptune, and then it's going to come into a square with Mars. Thankfully, most of that's going to happen overnight, at least here in the States and the West Coast, unless you happen to be somebody who's like working night shift or something. This is a bit of a complex square between the moon, Mars, and Neptune, but like I said, it's happening in the very late evening hours going into the early morning of the 22nd. And when we wake up on the 22nd, we see also just a gangbusters of transits that are happening this day as well. Finally, Saturn is getting ready to go direct on the 18th. You'll see that later in the day. So the Saturn retrograde is going to be over. So hooray, Saturn retrograde's done. In the early hours of the afternoon, we have also got a moon trine Pluto. So once we get the moon out of opposition the afternoon of the 22nd, and out of opposition with Neptune, out of a square with Mars, I don't know, I think we're still feeling that most of the day, personally. And when we're seeing like the moon opposed Neptune, we can emotionally disassociate. We don't know how to communicate our feelings. We kind of overthink things in the moon's in Virgo. And then it's going to come into a square with Mars. So there's a lot of like energy drain. What direction am I going in? Being kind of confused, taking a step back, which makes sense during like a balsamic moon. And then we are going to see that Mercury is going to trine Saturn, which is stationing, which is very interesting because the moon is in Virgo. So perhaps there's some insight that we get, some, some maturity that we develop, some lesson that we learn if we're actually just taking time to listen and assess and turn inward, rather than feeling like we need to be action oriented. I've already observed a couple times as the moon has gone through either Virgo or Sagittarius, and it squares these two planets, and it's like a nightmare because everything is changing and nothing's like really sticking, and there seems to be like some agitation. So I would say on the 22nd, like find some quiet time with the moon in a trine to Pluto to really reflect and think about what you want to change, how you can respond to things differently, how you can adapt, healthier habits and things that you can maintain. And I'm liking that Mercury trine Saturn because there can be opportunities to have serious conversations, serious commitment, laying the foundation, planning things, stuff like that. Late in the evening, we will see that the moon will go into Aries. Excuse me, the moon will go into Libra. It will oppose Jupiter in Aries. So the moon's going to go into Libra around the 8 o'clock hour-ish here on the West Coast. And that's going to be interesting too, because we're going to see moon oppose Mars, right? So the moon in Libra really wants us to focus on happiness and relationships and being able to counsel and be social and open to other people and romance and things like that. But with the moon in opposition to Jupiter, both at 0 degrees, and the ruler of the moon being at 29 degrees, it's going to be like somebody cranks up the volume. And this is where that new Venus Cazimi point emerges, right? So we've got Venus conjunct the sun, but this is in a superior position. Venus is ahead of the sun. So something is being highlighted about a turning point and a really significant karmic turning point. 29 is Saturn's degree in regards to our relationships, our love life, our harmony with others, law, fairness, something like that. So the evening of the 22nd, there is a little bit of emotional intensity. We also feel like as we're at this tipping point where both Venus and the sun are 29 degrees, the excess of relationships, the excess of diplomacy. Libra isn't always this like butterfly and rainbow type sign. They have the ability to mediate, but they also know when to basically be like, that wasn't fair. Or, I always will reference how Libras can kind of turn, and they can have a tendency to kind of be like judge and jury. So really significant energy here as the moon is getting ready to go through Libra, and these two planets are getting ready to go into Scorpio. You're going to definitely feel the energy change, okay? So then we get into, here we go. So this is the evening of the 22nd. So now this is the morning of the 23rd. Venus will enter Scorpio first, okay? So early morning on the 23rd, Venus enters Scorpio. Venus is going to be obviously uncomfortable in that sign. And right off the bat, we've got a lot of Mars energy. So look at how Venus moves into Scorpio. The sun moves into Scorpio, so we have that 3 or 4 day extended period of the sun and Venus moving together. When it's in Libra, I think you're going to hear more talk about like negotiations and balance and fairness and rights, and then as soon as it goes into Scorpio, it's like something turns. And these two planets will continue to be conjunct, although the Cazimi already happened in Libra. Venus is still ahead of the sun. Both of these planets have association with Mars, and then they're going to, in conjunct, Jupiter and Aries. 0 degrees Sun, 0 degrees Venus, 0 degrees Jupiter, the purest form of these signs. So where, 0 degrees of Aries is just like being shot out of a cannon, something is being initiated. All of these conjunctions in Scorpio at 0 degrees is about change, life, death, things that are turning over, the need to transform, to acknowledge the dark. The sun is now highlighting the darker themes of Venus. So it's been like lace and relationships and harmony and flowers and all this stuff in Libra, but then as soon as it goes into Scorpio, it's going to be like boom, like Scorpio season is off to a very significant start with a balsamic moon, a sun-Venus transit at the same time, Venus moving into a Pluto-Mars related sign, and an inconjunct to Jupiter, people are going to be super, super, super on edge the day before this lunar eclipse. Now, we'll still see that Mercury trine Saturn, okay? So that helps a little bit to where there can be some diplomacy, although we're going to lose that as the day goes on into the 23rd. And we're also getting ready to really focus on what is going on with both Pluto and Mars for the rest of Scorpio season. So we've got Pluto that just recently stationed. It is now direct, but it's still hanging out at 26 degrees. And then on the 30th, we're going to see Mars retrograde, but Mars is still in a rather tight square to Neptune. Mars is not going to surpass 25 degrees. It's going to stay there until it retrogrades on the 30th. So for us to start Scorpio season with a solar eclipse, conjunct Venus, something really big is about to be revealed about the financial markets. There's a bomb that's going to be dropped in some of our love lives or in some of our financial lives. And there is going to be something that is likely going to be unveiled that really challenges our personal beliefs, Jupiter retrograde in Aries, our personal freedoms, anything that deals with our ability to travel, venture, explore, you know, and yeah, it's a really significant way to kick off Scorpio season. We've got the traditional ruler in that square to Neptune, so there is a lot of fighting through the fog, questioning, you know, where are we going? What is our purpose? What are we fighting for? You know, is there clarity? Neptune deals with screens and anything in regards to what you would watch or what you would see, or any kind of manipulation in screens or artificial stuff. And then Mars in Gemini does deal with like the media machine, right? And what we're hearing and what we're seeing. So for Scorpio season to start with that square, and even if we look at it from the traditional ruler, Pluto is also in conjunct or quincunx Mars. So there's something that's just not really settling, right? And Moon is going to be in Libra, and it's coming into the eclipse. So it's like, guys, this week, as soon as we start seeing the Sun and Pluto squaring off, and then Venus and Pluto squaring off on the 19th, that's it. We're already in the eclipse energy. We'll have that eclipse on the 24th. That's going to be at 2 degrees of Scorpio. If you guys haven't already seen my video on that, please take a listen. I talk all about what it means, how it might play out. I briefly touch on where it's going to be taking place for all of the 12 rising signs. I did a webinar on these eclipses, both the solar eclipse in Scorpio as well as the lunar eclipse in Taurus that's taking place November 8th. You guys can find that on my website. So if you're interested in listening to that lecture, it's 4 hours long. I talk about all the rising signs at length, give you guys some tips, talk about how to work with this energy and my take on how it might affect everybody. Next week, I'm not really going to touch on the eclipse too much, only because I put videos out on both of these two eclipses. So if you want to check it out, you can. But I will tell you guys that if you have any placements between 0 and 4 degrees of the fixed signs, okay, especially Scorpio or Taurus, as well as 14 and 18 degrees of the fixed signs for the eclipse that's going to be on November the 8th. Probably a good idea to take a look at your chart, see where these eclipses are taking place, especially if it's happening on a personal planet or a sun, moon, or rising. I will invite you guys to come and hang out for one of my live readings. We're going to be doing live astrology readings on Saturday, 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. So that will be on the 22nd. I anticipate it's going to be very busy because it's going to be right before an eclipse. So I'm going to put the link out early. So if you guys want to take a look at that, if you want to sign up for a reading, it's all going to be donation based. We do them live on the channel. It's a great way to get in and get a mini reading and kind of find out what's going on with the eclipses, especially if you have any personal planets there. And I guess the week kind of wraps up with Mercury and a trine to Saturn. So as you're looking at that trine right before the eclipse, there are going to be opportunities to communicate, to get the point across, to share something. With all eclipses, I would try to, remind everybody, because something is being eclipsed, not everything is visible. Launches, significant, things that day, you might want to hold off and you might want to wait until the moon actually leaves the sign of Scorpio. because it can be rather intense and things are turning over. And to be honest with you, some of the aspects that are happening at the time of the eclipse is probably not ideal for most launches, significant travel, anything like that. Obviously, it's going to depend on your specific chart, but you know, eclipses are kind of like a anything goes period. But what I will tell you guys is if you take a look at what happens after this eclipse, so the moon will square Pluto, and then we have the eclipse here. Okay, so the eclipse will be at 2 degrees of Scorpio on the 24th, 25th? Be the 25th. So early morning on the 25th, but you're going to be feeling it the day before. We're then going to have the moon cross its own south node. So this is why I don't think it's a good idea for like launching significant things or doing anything like that, because that can represent a loss. So that'll be kind of going all the way until the 26th. And then we're also going to see Venus that's going to start approaching. So the good news is it's a new moon phase that we're starting. So if you do have to do something new, just wait probably either until the moon leaves Scorpio. You could do something like when the moon trines Jupiter, the early morning of the 27th, or you can wait until, you know, the sun and Venus have left the conjunction to the south node, but that's going to be in between eclipses. So if you guys are looking for a good election date, I would at least wait until the 27th. With eclipses also, remember that because this is a new moon, right? It's a solar eclipse. There's more action, starting new things. You want to take a look at where Scorpio is in your chart. Whatever is going on this next week, it's dismantling things, right? Libra is 12 houses to Scorpio. So we're clearing out all old fears, concerns, karmic stuff, karmic debt, insecurities, secrets, anything hidden in relationships, because that North Node in Taurus wants us to get stable and secure in our bodies, and it wants us to feel safe, and it wants us to kind of detach from trauma or fear or anything that's going to be shaking up our nervous systems. So like I said, guys, if you want to check out my webinar, check out my links below. You can go to my website. You can pick that webinar up. It is for sale if you'd like to take a look. Join me on Saturday night. We'll be doing the live readings. I look forward to talking to you guys and helping some of you guys out who have questions about these eclipses. Let me know where is this happening in your chart. I'd love to hear how it's panning out for you guys. This next week in the channel, we're going to be having all kinds of stuff that is getting ready to come out. So I'm going to be trying to get horoscopes ready for November. It's crazy, but that's already kind of coming out pretty soon. I'm also going to be putting something together to talk to you guys about the Mars retrograde that's taking place later in the month. Taking me a little bit longer to put that together because I want to be able to do a little bit more research and put together a presentation for you guys. And that's pretty much it for me. So enjoy the week ahead. Good luck. Get serious with this Saturn stationing because you're getting ready to see that long-term goals are getting ready to start revealing themselves, and everything is in preparation really to kind of clear out the old with these eclipses, bring in something that's new, and allow you to receive support from our friends, from social connections, from relationships, from partnerships. Keep communicating when things get difficult, and I will see all of you guys very soon. Enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.